On an average Saturday morning, a hiker parks at a paved trailhead less than an hour east of Phoenix, fills a water bottle, and walks into the Superstition Mountains. The parking lot is full. There are trail markers. By afternoon, the hiker is at the bottom of a canyon with no water left, no way to identify which ravine leads back to the trailhead, and a temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a mountain range visible from a strip mall parking lot, and it has been killing people at a rate that no official body has ever been willing to call abnormal. The Superstition Wilderness encompasses 160,000 acres of federally designated wilderness within the Tonto National Forest, roughly twice the size of the city of Denver, located 40 miles east of Phoenix, Arizona. Lost Dutchman State Park sits at the base. On any given weekend, hundreds of families walk its lower trails with water bottles and decent shoes, feeling safe. The trailheads have signs. The Peralta Trail, 4.5 miles round trip, delivers a postcard view of Weaver's Needle. The Hieroglyphic Trail, 3 miles round trip, leads to rock carvings left by the Hohokam over 1,000 years ago. The infrastructure of the entry experience, paved parking, maintained paths, interpretive signs, communicates a managed environment in which the most serious risks have already been identified and mitigated. They have not. They begin precisely where the maintained trail ends. Every year, roughly 4 to 5 hikers die in the Superstition Mountains. That figure, cited by George Johnston, the late president emeritus of the Superstition Mountain Museum, to the Arizona Republic, counts only the ones who were found. The Pinal County Sheriff's Office launched 22 search and rescue operations in the Superstitions in a single 12-month span around 2009 and 2010. 5 people died, and 1 was never found in that window alone. The institutional response to this pattern has been consistent across the agencies that manage and monitor the wilderness. Each death is ruled individually as accident or misadventure. Case files age into obscurity, and the aggregate record is never examined as a whole. No official body has looked at the full historical record of the Superstition Mountains and stated publicly that the pattern is not normal. The illusion of safety in the Superstition Mountains is more completely constructed than in almost any other dangerous landscape near a major American city because it is reinforced at every level of the visitor experience. The proximity to Phoenix signals accessibility. The state park at the base signals management. The maintained lower trails signal that the wilderness beyond them operates by the same rules. None of those signals are accurate past the trailhead. The first illusion is that proximity means safety. The Superstitions are close enough to Phoenix that visitors treat them as a day trip, a morning hike, a casual Saturday outing. That proximity produces a preparation gap that the terrain exploits with mechanical consistency. Search and rescue teams who operate in this wilderness have a term for the mechanism: a reverse mountain. Most mountain ranges require climbing first and descending later. The Superstitions invert this. Hikers descend into deep canyons feeling strong, covering ground quickly, burning through water at a rate the cool morning air disguises. Then they turn around. The canyon walls rise above them. The gentle slope they walk down now demands a 1,000-foot climb back to the trailhead. The temperature at the bottom of those canyons regularly exceeds 110 degrees in summer. Some reports cite 120. Water sources are nearly non-existent once a visitor leaves the marked paths, and the landscape is a web of unmarked ravines, cliff faces, and dead-end canyons that are visually indistinguishable from each other on the inside. A hiker who descended an easy slope for an hour may now face a cliff face in triple-digit heat with an empty water pack and no way to determine which of the surrounding canyons leads back and which dead ends against a wall of welded volcanic ash. The second illusion is that the dangers in the Superstitions are the ones that are visible: heat, dehydration, difficult terrain. These are real and present, and they are the hazards that the park's safety literature addresses. They are not the complete picture. The Superstition Mountains sit atop at least 3 collapsed supervolcano calderas: the Superstition, Goldfield, and Tortilla calderas, each 10 to 12 miles wide, formed roughly 25 million years ago. The geology is a jagged maze of welded volcanic tuff, rhyolite, breccia, basalt, and granite. That volcanic architecture creates acoustic properties that amplify underground seismic vibrations and project them outward through the canyon walls. Hikers standing on a ridge hear what sounds like distant thunder rolling beneath their feet on a clear day. The official website of Lost Dutchman State Park, run by Arizona State Parks, acknowledges this phenomenon directly. What the park literature does not address is what those vibrations do to the human body. Infrasound, frequencies below the threshold of conscious hearing, has been documented in research settings to induce anxiety, disorientation, nausea, and an overwhelming sense of dread without the subject understanding why. A person in a deep canyon with no visible exit, already dehydrated and disoriented, exposed to subsonic frequencies through the canyon walls, is not in the same cognitive state as a person standing in the parking lot at Lost Dutchman. They are in a fundamentally altered physiological state, and they are making decisions about which direction to move, about whether to push forward or turn back from inside that alteration. The third illusion is that the wilderness is unoccupied. The Superstition Search and Rescue Team, a volunteer organization that operates in this wilderness because official resources are insufficient, has documented a population of prospectors living illegally in the backcountry, some for years, on federal land where mining has been prohibited since the 1964 wilderness designation. This population is unmonitored, largely invisible to law enforcement, and by multiple witness accounts, includes individuals who are territorial, armed, and in some cases, actively hostile to other people entering certain areas. When a group of hikers approached an isolated camp draped in camouflage netting to ask for water, they received a single word from behind the tarp: leave. This is not remote Alaskan backcountry 100 miles from the nearest road. It is wilderness within driving distance of nearly 4 million people, containing a human element that official sources acknowledge only in passing, and that the press covers almost not at all. Start with the terrain, because the terrain is the foundation on which every other danger in the Superstitions operates, and because the reverse mountain mechanism is specifically calibrated to exploit the assumptions that proximity to a major city produces. Kenny Clark was found dead 5 days after he went for a hike in the Superstitions. His body was discovered off-trail with an empty water pack. Christopher Childers, a 53-year-old Phoenix lawyer and experienced hiker, left his house at 6:30 in the morning for what was planned as a routine outing. His family noticed his phone's GPS location stopped moving on the mountain. He was found dead. No foul play suspected. A man who went for a hike less than an hour from his house and did not come home. The reverse mountain did not announce itself to either of them. It never does. The descent feels like progress. The canyon floor feels like a destination. The climb back, in heat that is built through the morning hours, with water that ran out an hour ago, in terrain that has no distinguishing features from inside it, is a different experience entirely than the one the morning suggested. But the heat and the terrain together do not account for the full character of what happens in these mountains, and the geological explanation for the sounds the Superstitions produce deserves more examination than it typically receives. One visitor, who spent a single night camped in the backcountry, later described the experience in detail. The ground beneath him vibrated. His compass spun without settling. He was overwhelmed by a fear so intense and so sourceless that he abandoned his tent and all his gear and fled to his vehicle in the dark, navigating only by strips of cloth he had tied to bushes on the way in. He was an experienced outdoorsman who had spent weeks alone in some of the most remote wilderness in the western United States. He later concluded he had been exposed to subsonic frequencies emanating from the canyon walls. He did not return to the Superstitions. This account cannot be verified independently, and it cannot be dismissed as obviously false, because the mechanism it describes, infrasound generating uncontrollable psychological distress in an enclosed geological environment, is consistent with documented research on low-frequency sound exposure. The Superstitions' volcanic geology creates exactly the physical conditions under which such frequencies could be produced and amplified through canyon walls. Whether this is what is happening and how consistently it happens across different locations in the wilderness is a question that has never been formally studied. The indigenous peoples who lived in and around these mountains arrived at their conclusions about the Superstitions through millennia of direct experience with the same terrain, and those conclusions were not ambiguous. The Akamel O'odham, also known as the Pima, are the people most directly responsible for the range's name and its reputation in American consciousness. They told accounts of strange sounds from inside the peaks, of people who entered and did not return, of deaths that could not be attributed to terrain or weather. When American settlers arrived in the 19th century and heard these accounts, they translated the indigenous name into English: the Superstition Mountains. That was not romantic frontier branding. It was a direct translation of indigenous fear into the settlers' language. The Apache relationship with the mountains adds a further dimension. According to Apache oral tradition, the mountains served as a gateway to the lower world, a place where the boundary between this world and something older grew thin. Warriors entered on vision quests and emerged transformed or driven mad, or did not emerge at all. The Yavapai maintained villages within the wilderness. The Hohokam left petroglyphs along the hieroglyphic trail that no living person can fully interpret. Multiple indigenous groups, separated by centuries and cultural tradition, arrived at the same conclusion about the same place. When the Spanish arrived in 1540 under Coronado, the Apache warned them explicitly that trespassing on this ground would bring consequences. Several Spanish expeditions entered the range between the 16th and 18th centuries. Those who returned described compasses that would not settle and paths that seemed to change between visits. The Spanish named the mountains Monte Superstition and stopped sending parties in, and then came the gold, which has been pulling people into terrain that every prior culture warned against for over 130 years. Jacob Waltz, called the Dutchman despite being German, claimed in the 1870s to have found a rich gold mine somewhere in the Superstition Mountains. He returned from the mountains with nuggets of unusually high purity, spent the money, and refused to say where they came from. People followed him. He evaded them. He died in 1891, reportedly describing the mine's location on his deathbed to a neighbor who never found it. Nobody has. No credible physical evidence that the Lost Dutchman mine exists has ever been produced, but the legend functions as a gravity well, pulling people into terrain that multiple cultures spent centuries warning against, generation after generation, and it has been doing so continuously since Waltz died. The documented cases that follow span more than 150 years and resist a simple explanation. In 1931, retired veterinarian Adolf Ruth entered the Superstitions in June with a treasure map, walking with a cane, metal pins in one leg from a previous injury. His skull was found 6 months later. A leading physical anthropologist identified 2 holes consistent with a high-powered rifle, a small entry wound, and a larger exit. His body was recovered 3/4 of a mile from his head. His pistol was fully loaded. He had never fired it. The Maricopa County coroner ruled his death natural causes. The investigation files were sealed by court order for 50 years and, when they became public record in 1982, reportedly contradicted much of what had been publicly stated. In 2008, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office destroyed all investigation records from before 1935. The Adolf Ruth case files were gone permanently. In the mid-1940s, a retired photographer named James Cravey chartered a helicopter into the backcountry with 10 days of supplies. When the pilot returned 2 days later, only 2 days' worth of food had been consumed. His headless remains were found in the wilderness. His skull was discovered separately, at a distance from the body. No cause of death was established. October 1960 brought 4 bodies in roughly 6 months. A headless skeleton identified as an Austrian student, a second skeleton found nearby 5 days later, a prospector found shot in the back and buried under sand, and another prospector with bullet wounds whose death was ruled suicide. Not a single arrest followed any of these deaths. In July 2010, 3 men from Utah entered the Superstitions together searching for the mine. Curtis Merworth, Ardean Charles, and Malcolm Meeks all disappeared. Their remains were found months later in open terrain, fully clothed, shoes on, with no apparent sign of struggle or attempt to help each other. Their deaths were ruled hypothermia. Merworth's body was found half a mile from the other 2. Jesse Kappen drove alone from Denver to Arizona in November 2009. Investigators searching his apartment afterward found more than 100 books and maps, all focused on the Superstition Mountains. He had made at least 2 prior trips that no one in his life knew about. On December 4th, 2009, he climbed to the summit of Tortilla Mountain and placed a note in a metal canister at the top. Jesse Kappen was here. December 4th, 2009. His Jeep was found at the trailhead. His tent was intact at his campsite. His wallet was inside. Volunteers with the Superstition Search and Rescue Team searched every weekend for 3 years. They eventually found a day pack at the base of a cliff on Tortilla Mountain. Looking up, they spotted something wedged into the rock approximately 35 feet above the ground, a single boot. His skeleton was wedged into a crevice in the cliff face so tightly and so completely concealed that it was invisible from every approach angle. 3 years of weekly searches had passed before anyone spotted one boot in one crack in one cliff. His cause of death was never determined. Here is what ties all of this together and what makes the Superstition Mountains genuinely different in character from the other dangerous American landscapes that produce comparable patterns of death and disappearance. Most dangerous landscapes operate through a single primary mechanism: a thermal environment that overwhelms the body, a cold water temperature that stops muscle coordination, a terrain that eliminates navigation. The superstitions operate through three simultaneously, and the three are specifically calibrated to interact. The reverse mountain terrain drains water and traps visitors at elevation in triple-digit heat. The acoustic environment generated by the volcanic geology can produce physiological disorientation in a person who is already dehydrated and already lost. And the unmonitored human population in the backcountry adds a dimension of risk that official sources have consistently underweighted and the press has consistently ignored. Each mechanism alone is dangerous. The combination is something that does not appear in any search and rescue manual, and it has been operating in the same 160,000 acres for as long as human memory in this region reaches. The institutional response to this convergence has been consistent and telling. Each death is adjudicated individually. The aggregate record is never examined. Investigation files are destroyed on schedule. Official rulings trend toward accident and misadventure regardless of the circumstances. The Tonto National Forest closes periodically, citing fire danger. The trails reopen. The parking lots fill again on Saturday. This is not a conspiracy. It is bureaucratic inertia, the path of least administrative resistance, which happens to also be the path that ensures no agency ever has to account for a pattern that spans a century and a half and includes headless bodies, skulls with bullet holes ruled natural causes, and 3 years of weekly searches required to find one boot in one cliff crack. The indigenous peoples who named these mountains did not name them after a feeling. The Pima warned the settlers. The Apache warned the Spanish. The Spanish named the mountains after the warning and stopped sending expeditions. The ranchers warned the prospectors. The prospectors warned each other. Every cultural tradition that has had sustained contact with this place has arrived at the same conclusion and passed it to the next group of newcomers in whatever language was available. The warning has been continuous and consistent for as long as any record reaches. The Superstition Mountains do not adjust their lethality for the proximity of Phoenix, or for the paved parking lot at the trailhead, or for the families taking photographs of the sunset behind the ridgeline on a Saturday evening. It doesn't care that you can see it from the freeway. It never did. Subscribe, because the wilderness doesn't warn you, and someone should.